This is the 2022 Apple TV 4K, and after a year and a half of owning this device, I need it now more than ever. Lately, I've become increasingly frustrated with all my TVs and their built-in operating systems. And if there's anything that I've learned about most smart TVs, even higher end models or projectors for that matter, is that the general functionality and experience is getting pretty terrible. That seems to be only getting worse, so much so that I've actually just given up and I'm buying Apple TVs for all my TVs, and today I want to talk about why that is. I want to touch on why these TV platforms seem to be in a constant state of decline, why they'll likely continue on that trajectory, and how these little guys have saved the day for me on multiple fronts. So if you're someone who is frustrated with your TV software, maybe you're looking for a reason to buy an Apple TV, or you're just curious about my experience over the last couple of years, stick around and let's get into it. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. The Apple TV is interesting in that if you don't already own one, it can be hard to tell what the benefit is. Like, why on earth would you spend $130 on another thing that needs to attach to your TV just to give you similar functionality to what the TV offers? And the simplest answer that I can give is the experience. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, if you already own a smart TV these days, chances are you've probably run into some bugs, maybe things have felt slow or laggy, and especially in the last couple of years, you're probably seeing more ads show up. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want to spend $1,000 or more on a TV just for it to be plastered with ads, and I want to talk about that more in a couple of minutes, but let's focus solely on the performance side of things for now. Almost all cheaper TVs, and frankly even more expensive models, are usually quite underpowered. They're fine for showing content and the primary things a TV needs to do, like decoding video, but when it comes to running an operating system filled with apps, they tend to struggle quite a bit. I've got a couple cheaper TVs around the house running Roku and Tizen operating systems, and they're painfully slow to boot up and navigate around. Button presses are way behind, and the software itself is just extremely frustrating to use. Not only that, but app developers will often stop supporting TVs that are underpowered, even if they're only a few years old. So even though you have a perfectly fine TV in terms of the actual operation and picture, in many cases, the original functionality just won't work the same. With an Apple TV like the 2022 4K model that I have here, there's an A15 Bionic chip running everything, which is probably the fastest and most powerful processor you're gonna find in any TV or streaming device. Even with this being out for around a year and a half now, it shows no signs of slowing down, and that will probably be the case for many years to come. Part of that is because Apple has remained on the same mobile architecture throughout its existence, and older models from 9 years ago still receive regular software updates with the newest versions of tvOS. Those updates are stable, predictable, and very rarely ever introduce any issues. Other brands, on the other hand, often produce wildly different hardware between each generation of their products, and have all kinds of model variants that all run the same software, which can introduce a lot worse overall experience with updates, as can the choices they make with the software itself. One of those choices is the introduction of ads, like I mentioned earlier. If you have a relatively new TV or streaming device, you've probably come across more and more ads showing up on your dashboard, and some platforms are more prominent than others. I believe Amazon Fire TV is the worst for this, but you'll see this in just about every TV, whether that's Android-based, WebOS, Roku, or Tizen, and it appears to be only getting worse. Several companies have said that they'll be leaning into ads and ad tracking functionality plastered across their software, and the Apple TV seems to have been the most resilient in that regard. Now, you still might find ads in your streaming apps, but obviously that's more of a third-party decision than Apple's, but the nice thing is they do give you the option to deny those services the ability to track your behavior, which can't be said for a lot of these other platforms. That might not seem like that big of a deal for some folks, but I know a lot of people don't like being inundated with ads, and for good reason. Spending an absurd amount of money on a TV should absolve you from being force-fed ads, in my opinion, and a lot of these manufacturers are collecting your data on top of that, which all kind of feels icky. New updates can not only introduce more ad space, but can functionally make things a lot worse as well. And this is something that happened to me recently, which is what ended up being the nail in the coffin with my Samsung OLED TV. The latest update has been very buggy, both with a number of apps and with my network connection, and generally everything just runs a whole lot better through tvOS. and I can give you a few reasons as to why that is. Things have stayed consistent with the hardware on these devices, which helps a lot, but tvOS is basically just a spin-off from iOS. And because iOS is so popular and is relatively easy to develop for, many streaming apps often have the best experience and get updates more frequently on iOS, and because the Apple TV is just a repurposed iPhone to some extent, it's easier to port apps over and maintain them. There's also apps I use with features on the Apple TV that exist on no other platform, like split screen functionality when I watch football or sports. Some lesser known or more regional apps I use are just way less buggy, and even some of the bigger name apps just run a lot smoother. Android or Google TVs can share similar benefits at times, but are still sometimes missing features. If you're a big Netflix user, they've actually pulled their Google TV integration, so you might not even be able to find it depending on what TV you have, and you often have to find some kind of workaround just to get it to run. For me, I just want this stuff to work, and I don't want to tinker around with anything or figure out any weird gotchas for each TV, and I've been really frustrated in that sense, not only on the software side of things with the UI and apps, but the network connection as well. The Apple TVs that I have here are on Wi-Fi 6 and have Bluetooth 5.0, so not the most recent wireless specs, but in terms of overall wireless connectivity and stability, they're still hands down the best that I've tried when it comes to a smart TV platform. I've always had trouble with my TVs and network connections. I don't know if I'm just cursed or what, but I often find that I've got to reset the connection or reconnect to the network when I start the TV, and the connection itself is rarely as good as my other devices. In contrast to that, my Apple TVs connect to my network no problem, and I've not had a single issue. Speeds are great, and I generally bump up against less quality or buffering issues, and on the Bluetooth side of things, pairing up my AirPods allows me to listen to all my content with spatial audio, which sounds phenomenal. Sometimes in the early morning when I don't want to wake anyone up, or if there's just a lot of noise around me, I'll pop in my AirPods while I'm watching something, and it's like I'm listening through a premium home theater setup. The great thing is, I don't have to do anything special to get them to work with my Apple TV. Like any other Apple product, the Apple TV will use Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to detect other devices close to me and will allow me to easily add them or users within my home. I can use my phone as a remote or for signing into accounts with Face ID or the keyboard. Using the iPhone keyboard instead of the on-screen one feels a lot less clunky and much more efficient, and you do have keychain access and password managers available on your phone, which is a huge plus. I can even calibrate my TV or adjust any audio sync issues with my iPhone, and additionally, I've got all my Apple ecosystem features like AirPlay, handoff, continuity camera, photo and video sharing, and so on, which are still being added to with software updates. Now, speaking of updates, it has been a while since a new Apple TV device has been released. In November, it'll be 2 years since this latest model was introduced, and if you're on the fence about picking one of these up, or you want to see what the next iteration brings, that might be right around the corner. There have been rumors that we'll see a new Apple TV in the first half of this year that could potentially have a camera and be controlled with hand gestures similar to the Vision Pro, but not much is known about it yet, and frankly, that's all unsubstantiated at this point. But one thing that we will see is tvOS 18 at WWDC, which I'm sure will have even more features, and that will certainly be available on these current models. When it comes down to it, for me, the Apple TV is the best option that we have for a device that you can just use with the least amount of friction and the best experience. It's not bloated with ads like some other platforms. Apps are generally more stable and work better, and you get a host of features that you just don't see anywhere else. So while it might seem silly to buy a new TV and then spend an extra $130 to essentially get similar functionality to what's offered in that TV, you're getting a much better overall experience. So if you're wondering if it's still worth it to pick one of these up, or you're not sure if you'll like it, my advice would just be to try one out for a week and see how it goes. You've got a 15-day window to return it to Apple if you're not into it, and probably more with other retailers, but I do think that this is one of these products that is not super appealing on the surface, but Once you have one, you realize how much better they are than everything else. I know I didn't mention everything that you can do with the Apple TV, so by all means, let me know in the comments down below if you use yours for things that I didn't bring up that you think might have value. That's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video or you found it useful. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. If you want to see more tech-related content or help me build an e-reader that audibly gasps anytime there's a plot twist in a book, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next upload.